Minutes there.
That's a shame. I was just up there.
Okay, I'm getting the memo. It is showing on my screen.
Okay.
So start recording. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the May 2021 Programs and Policy Subcommittee of the Minneapolis Pedestrian Advisory Committee. It is our monthly meeting. I'm Peter Vader, co-chair, here with Julia Curran, other co-chair of this subcommittee. And Millicent, I'll ask you to, if you can record participants off the participant list.
Oh, well, let me read this notice first then. You can't see it.
Sure, right. Yeah, thank you.
All right, this meeting may involve the remote participation by members, either by telephone or other electronic means, due to the local public health emergency, novel coronavirus pandemic, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota statutes, section 13B.021.
Thank you, Millicent, for reading that.
I'll just take roll as people come in and you guys can go ahead.
Much appreciated. Thank you. And we have 6 items on the agenda today, and we're starting off with a review of a resolution for Abigail Johnson's bringing regarding the 20-year streets funding plan. And Abigail, over to you.
Thanks. So this agenda item I'd love to just kind of share, and Matthew, obviously you can fill in as needed. But what's attached here, and I don't know, Chris or whoever wants to share the screen of the Bicycle Advisory Committee's resolution. But the 20-year streets funding plan is basically, it's an ordinance. And Alyssa I've been questioning this, but Alyssa finally really got to the bone of it and did some digging. But the 20-year streets funding plan, is often that plan where it's well, we have to do this level of street repaving projects, and Public Works kind of blames the street funding plan on why we have to spend money on that instead of quick build bike infrastructure or pedestrian infrastructure, kind of in a way. So the idea is that the 20-year street funding plan ordinance, the ordinance is very not specific. So it's actually Public Works definition of the ordinance that is actually problematic. So the Bicycle Advisory Committee already passed this resolution saying that they would like for Public Works to reconsider how they interpret the 20-year streets funding plan and ordinance so that it can actually be used for all the things that are outlined in the Transportation Action Plan as important, and utilize that money in different ways. So Matthew or Chris, if you have anything to add, otherwise I'd just love if we looked at this or if anybody had any questions on this topic, because I think the goal here is to kind of align with the Bicycle Advisory Committee to kind of get some funding to go the direction of bike ped.
I'll just add that from my perspective, I guess, as staff, it's complicated, I'm sure, but what that ordinance actually says and what the parameters of the 20-year streets funding plan, other Public Works staff will describe that in further detail when they come back at some point in the future to talk about updating the plan. So I guess I don't have much more nuance or details to that right now, just that this conversation has been happening internal to Public Works and they're aware of this conversation, and also I guess acknowledge the need to update the plan. I guess that's what I'll add.
Abigail,
I would go.
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry. I would just go one step further beyond acknowledging that it will be needs to be updated, in that it's an upcoming priority. It will happen soon.
Great. I agree.
I don't know.
So I guess we're open for questions. Otherwise I can read what the BAC has, and maybe then I could from there edit it for the PAC if we're interested in this.
Yeah, but please read it as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. So the Bicycle Advisory Committee one says, the Minneapolis BAC asks Minneapolis Public Works to commit to amending the 20-year streets funding plan to align with the Transportation Action Plan. The TAP calls for transformative change within the same time frame as the 20-year streets funding plan and should directly influence all plans for uses of transportation funding. Amending the plan must be a rapid and strategic priority for Public Works and should be completed before the council's consideration of the 2022 budget. The Minneapolis BAC requests that Public Works come to our committee in May 2021 to present on the 20-year streets funding plan as it exists in its current form. The Minneapolis BAC further requests that we and other key stakeholders, including the PAC and the Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities, be directly and significantly involved in the process to amend the 20-year streets funding plan. So obviously we'd edit a couple of things in there just for our committee and the timeline of it. But I don't know if anybody has any other questions or thoughts on this.
I would.
Abigail. Oh,
Go
so
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead, Chris. No, you go ahead, Christopher.
Abigail, could you just do you have a little more backstory as to what amendment must occur for it to be meaningfully consistent with the TAP? I mean, did you guys get a chance to talk about that, or I mean, is it a big amendment, or I mean, did you get a sense of that at all?
Matthew, why don't you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, and again, I'm gonna I will to the best of my ability, and then we'll look to other staff to give proper context when they attend. So the ordinance is fairly short in that with the ordinance came more money for capital improvement projects, and the step following the passage of the ordinance several years ago, I think 2016, was the creation of the 20-year streets funding plan, which set out criteria both in terms of pavement condition and a bunch of equity metrics, including community demographics and like modal uses and things like that. That ended up, or that's how we select street construction projects. And a lot of that was based, a lot of that funding, or the purpose and need for that funding was to a long-term goal of keeping the pavement condition index, or PCI, at a reasonable level, or a high enough level that doesn't create like a huge fiscal problem by deferred maintenance, more or less. So I'm not sure if I got off the question, but that's basically what the 20-year streets funding plan says now, is like how we went about selecting the criteria that turns into the projects. To maybe fill in some gaps, I think a lot of where this is coming from is tied to the themes that were presented in the report to TMPW this year, and sort of a value or a judgment conversation about where we should be putting our money as a city for transportation improvements. A lot of it, I guess, does go to street reconstruction right now, and the PAC-BAC have been asking for a different way to fund projects. And maybe this is where I can ask Abigail if you can clarify more if that's right. But instead of reconstructing a certain number of streets for a certain number of dollars, like do less of that and put that money towards transformational change.
Right, like full like systems-wide change, like quick builds, because again, like removing cars off of streets will also reduce the wear and tear on the street. And then also, Christopher, I would just say, remember that the goal of this is also to ask that Public Works comes and presents on this topic, which is why that's the third paragraph. So a lot of these questions we'd probably, banter about with Public Works staff who come to present on it, and then hopefully we can get the ball rolling on amending how Public Works kind of buckets this funding by definition.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm just kind of missing the thread a little bit. Is it who has to amend it, or can Public Works just read it differently? I mean, and can they just take action? Could they take action tomorrow, or does it have to go through any sort of official amendment by council or anything? Or is it just how they interpret it in policy and use it in Public Works? I mean, that would be really straightforward, and there's no reason, then it shouldn't take long if it's just a policy interpretation that's different. I don't know. I haven't
Yeah.
maybe that's a question for
Yeah,
another time.
Matthew, do you know that?
Chris.
I mean, yeah, so I'll jump in. I mean, theoretically, you could do both. So like, I think, like, either way, you could change the ordinance. If you all thought that the ordinance was the wrong thing and like the thing that was stopping us from doing it, like you could ask us to change that and we could try to do that. And that's one type of thing. But also like there is leeway within the way that we perform the 20-year streets funding plan. Like, for example, there's basically what it is it sets up metrics. So you have pavement condition data, and that gives a certain amount of points. And then you have equity and demographic data, and that gives a certain amount of points, and each street gets a score. And that's how we decide where the money goes. And so one other aspect of this that would not require an ordinance change for sure would just simply be to update the scoring categories, add, take away, redistribute points, and things like that. And so I think at the very least, like Public Works is taking a look at what it will do within the existing ordinance. And then like that other piece is something that I guess I don't know where Public Works staff stand on that, but that's just kind of a separate piece.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for the explanation. Anytime you get changing an ordinance, it just seems like it goes glacially sometimes. So it's good that a lot can be done within Public Works, but thank you everyone for that explanation. I appreciate it.
And then finally, there may be some fairly important differences in how the BAC and PAC are thinking about an update to the 20-year streets funding plan, and perhaps what may be in the works from Public Works. And that's why you're both asking for Public Works to come talk to you about that. I think that will be important. I just want to note that I think the desire to update it is probably coming from very different places. Just to be clear.
That's kind of alarming.
Well, I don't actually mean for it to be to be alarming. What I mean is is like a lot has changed over the life of the existing 20-year streets funding plan. Like a lot of policies have been passed and things like that. So it's almost like it makes sense to update it. And so I mean, maybe it's okay that it's alarming, but I didn't, like, in my mind, I wasn't sharing an alarming thing.
and just for the sake of like having 4 other items on the agenda, I think that's why we really want Public Works to come and like to have this be a presentation. So I don't know if there's any other like thoughts on this itself and like that request.
Do we know how? I mean, I think it's a great idea to have them come so we can get more information from them directly and talk a little bit about how we might amend it. Do we have a sense of how fast that could happen? Because it says in here that it has to be completed before the council's consideration of the 2022 budget, which I am assuming happens by the end of the year. Is that correct?
Yeah. Okay. So there's some things in here that, first of all, it's not going to happen by the 2022 budget. Like it's just not like that.
Good to know.
Has that electric scooter has left the station. Like that. Like we're so far down that path already. So there are a couple things like I wouldn't. If I were to modify this, I would take that out and like a specific date coming back. I mean, that's your prerogative, but the soonest it would be impacted probably would be the 2023 budget year.
The budget year.
That seems fairly alarming given the time frame that we have for mode share shift. If we were actually in line with our global climate goals.
Well, Julia,
climate goals.
That timeline, from what I understand, isn't because like we aren't going to do it until next year. It's because even if we start it right now, I don't think that we would finish that work and be able to put the amount of work that's needed to do that like by the end of the budget cycle or whatever it says.
Yeah, like the click process has already happen, you know. I see a hand, Christopher.
Yes, why, I would like to move that we conform a PAC motion to the existing BAC motion and send it out as soon as we can and encourage Public Works to come to us. I guess it would be in June of 2021, if that at all, if we could start the conversation. So I move that we, the PAC adopts a motion consistent with the BAC motion with the edit, since we're already in May 2021, that would request that Public Works come to our June 2021 meeting.
And Christopher, I appreciate that. I don't know that we need a formal, you know, a formal vote and things like that. But I guess between this subcommittee and the full, we could just, so somebody could take this and tweak it based on what you just said.
Yes,
Yeah.
I already took the content and I'm tweaking
Cool.
it. I'm also removing this should be completed before the council's consideration of the 2022 budget. Matthew, you're saying that that's a useless phrase, but I am just keeping the first half of that sentence. Amending the plan must be a rapid and strategic priority for Public Works.
Yeah, that sounds
And
good.
then I'm asking them
Are
to
we,
come in July of 2021, just assuming that like coming in June is a little too much, or can I ask for June?
You can ask for whatever you prefer. I've gotten feedback that there isn't, like, they, you know, asking for a specific date is not what my coworkers would like.
Okay.
But they plan on coming soon on this topic.
Okay.
are we coordinating with Macropod on this, or what? This is the first time I feel like I've noticed hearing them included. So is this something they're also passing?
I think the goal is just to mention them as stakeholders. I don't know if Alyssa's reached out to them. You might want to just ask Alyssa about that.
I don't think so.
Okay, I would. Okay, I mean, they're not one of the Public Works commissions, so I might remove that. Although I think it would be great to have a Public Works group that might be similar but more focused on the
Remove them
transportation. Sorry.
Just remove them completely as stakeholders on this item.
Well, it's like they're not, their role is different than our role on the PAC, and I think that at least in the past, they aren't seeing the same projects and are not necessarily, I feel like they might not be the best way of getting a sense of what the needs of people within different disability communities would be. So
Okay.
if the intent is to capture that, I would be more explicit about that rather than calling out Macropod specifically as much
Okay.
about a formal relationship.
I'll
That's all.
just delete everything in the parentheses there. Just to say we and other people. All right. Anything else on this? Okay, I will be sending to everybody attending this meeting, PAC members, the resolution draft with all the edits.
Terrific, Abigail. Thank you. And anything more on that subject, or if not, we're gonna move on. But thanks. And the next item, which is a discussion about orientation for new members, and Julia Curran. Hello, Julia.
Hi. So this one is just our standard welcoming people and trying to figure out if we're going to do buddies for people, what we might do if I'm assuming we'll still be doing video meetings, but how I'm so sorry about the breeze. If how we bring people into the PAC and make people feel included. So
How about hazing?
especially sorry. What did you say, Neil?
How about hazing? You know, make people walk backwards around
I
the.
think walking in Minneapolis is already hazing.
That's right. Good grief, can you imagine?
But
And
yeah,
I,
I mean,
I think one of the goals of putting this on here was just to remind everybody that 3 new members minimum, right, Matthew, will be joining us in July. So that's coming up soon. And one thing I wanted to highlight was just like, we just did this in February. And I guess I wanted to check on, like, do we think that the February orientation at the full committee went well? And do we want to kind of just replicate that for July? Those were kind of my thoughts on that.
Hey, it's Peter. One of these things, one of the items we talked about was an affirmative reaching out from current members to two new members. And if that's something we could do, and I would certainly take 1 or 2 to do between now and the end of the next P&P, we can use that to inform some of our new member discussion and talk about new orientation. And that, since that was part of our part of what we plan to do, let's incorporate that. If we can get that done, then we would know whether we want to do it again. I would feel like we would, but I just had that on the list of our new member orientation items to do. Other than that, I'm not sure. I wouldn't add a thing. The glossary being built will help, and that's it. What are others thinking?
I guess we aren't.
No, I mean, I think repeating a little bit of that at the full meeting and then doing some nice welcomes, at the full and the first P&P feels pretty good to me.
I agree. I think it worked well the last 3, or that I don't think we need substantial change.
I'd be glad to reach out to somebody too. If there's a new member that needs talking to, I'd be glad to check them.
And that would be 2, right? Since one of the 3 is absented themselves. Is that right? So Matthew and Chris are the 2 new members who count as new members until July. Is that right?
But then we'll get some additional new members, right?
We will be guaranteed to have 3 brand new members at least.
Okay.
And then I imagine not more than that either.
Okay.
So there's 8 openings, 5 existing members reapplied. So that leaves 3 totally new seats.
Okay.
Barb, then I'm just going to coordinate with you after the meeting, and then we'll
I'd be glad to.
flip a coin.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
I have a kind of a side question here. Has there been any talk about when we can start meeting in person again, or is that off a few months yet?
There's not been talk of that.
Okay.
We aren't, as staff, we're not going back until September. So at the very earliest, I would say that, but there also hasn't been any mention of it at all. So I wouldn't count on September either. But.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it'd be measured in years.
Got it.
Do we want to think about, Peter and I met up and walked a little, I think twice since the pandemic started, which has been great to touch base as co-chairs. Is that something we want to consider, just reaching out to each other or doing something while the weather is where you still sit outside and being able to connect that way?
Well,
not as a meeting.
I know last summer we planned one in September, outside of meeting times, obviously. And it ended up just being me and Julia and Matthew, which was super fun. But now, things are kind of different. So I'm sure, maybe, Julia, we could plan maybe a walk in like August or something, or maybe September, like the way we do a yearly walk, and see if that, and see if people want to do that.
That sounds great. I just want to be able to have that ability to connect with people, and especially even if we do have the ability to be in person sometime in the fall or winter, I would imagine that not everyone wants to be in unventilated spaces again right away. So doing what we can while we have all the lovely outdoor ventilation for conversation seems great.
Just a reminder, if we have quorum meeting together, we can't talk business. So Julia, I don't know if that'll work for you, but
there's a couple of you who are really good at shushing me, and we'll talk for you if need be.
Any other thoughts or input from people on the new member orientation? Welcome.
My only thought is in July as well, we vote on an entire slate of the exec committee. And so if you want to keep and or change and or thoughts about your role, if you're on the exec committee, or if you're not on the exec committee and you're interested, feel free to reach out to me. I'm like very flexible and thinking a lot about the different things about that. So as well as even for myself. So maybe on the exec call tomorrow, we could kind of reiterate that conversation. Not that we have to have it this month, but maybe on the exec call, we just kind of remind each other to think about it and talk about it together so that we can make those decisions. Or if anybody new is interested, we can kind of make those decisions together. That's all I have.
Terrific. Yeah, good input. That, yeah, that'll be important to do tomorrow. With that, we've got our next agenda item up, which is a discussion about moving the engineering subcommittee meeting dates. Is that right, Chris? That describes it?
Yeah. So this is more just like a testing the waters, see if there's interest. Frankly, I don't even know that we need to. So here's the premise for this is that the BAC is moving their meeting up a week. So typically in most months, the BAC has their engineering meeting on Tuesday, and then the PAC has theirs on Thursday, which is a little bit of a nice convenience for staff that come to present. It just helps with scheduling when they have to coordinate a lot of different engagement events. The reason the BAC is moving it is because there's a really short window between the engineering meeting and then needing to get all the agenda materials out for the full. So all the minutes and like all that stuff has to happen in like 2 days or something like kind of ridiculous. So they have like a technical reason for it, or like a logistical reason, I guess, for it. That makes sense for them because they're moving it. I just wanted to like float it out, and ultimately Barb and Aaron obviously right now are the chairs. So like, I think we can chat further about like what you think as chairs of the committee. Mostly just floating this out to see what folks think, if there are like major red flags, or if people don't really care and it would still work for them on the Thursday before, or so yeah.
Chris, they want to move it back a week? Is that what you're saying?
They're moving it so it'll be earlier in the month. It'll be the
second week, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's the second.
Right now, the engineering is in the third week, right?
Yes. Yeah. So frankly, I'll just be honest. I don't need to push it one way or the other, and like the fact that Thursday on the third week is working right now, like it might just be best to let it sit, and like that's totally fine with me. So I hope this doesn't come off as like me trying to pressure one way or the other. At first, when I heard the BAC was moving, I was kind of like, oh, that could become a little bit of a pressure on staff. But frankly, I think they just show up whenever we send the calendar invites for the month where they need to bring it. And I mean, they would just have to deal with it wherever it is. So.
There's also like currently, I think it's if the month starts on a Wednesday, there'll be different days already, and that hasn't been problematic. So it's more just curious what you all think and if you want to coordinate.
Well, for the, who knows how long I'll be on it, but that right now, that Thursday works just fine for me. And, but, you know, I think it's more important, like for Aaron, if he were, or whoever has other obligations, like I'm not working, so I can adjust my schedule. But I know Aaron's working, so I don't know what his, plus he has kids. That family schedule might be different for him. So, and we may not be it after July. So that's my input for right now.
Yeah, the other thing is like it might not make sense to change it right now because the first month that we would change it for would be July, and then we have new folks and like I don't know. When I first heard about this, I thought it was going to be a bigger thing, and then like as I thought about it more and more, I almost even just took it off the agenda for today. So that's kind of why it's this sort of thing. So I guess I'll just propose to keep it the same, and like if anyone has any objections to that, which I doubt it, but let me know.
Okay.
It sounded like it went on the agenda with at the time it did. It was more uncertain about what staff's response would be, or whether staff would want to change it. And I would just as an INE attendee, I would defer to them. 1 month, 1 day of the week, just personally speaking, 1 day of the month is as good as the other. 4:30 to 4:30 to 6. I just also want to rise in object to Barb's any intimation Barb is making about not being on INE in the future. That don't get your hopes up.
I wasn't getting my hopes up. I was just saying, that's the reality. So I'm just speaking for the next 2 months.
Please take this cross from my back.
I didn't say that. I don't feel
You didn't say that, did you?
No, not at all. I don't feel that. But thanks for
Thank you, Barb.
No, you're stuck with it.
All right, thanks, Chris. Next up, we added an item called Future CIP Planning to the agenda. This the specific of this agenda item came from adding an item we added to our PNP list that stemmed from a I wouldn't say arrested discussion, but a closed discussion from a general meeting when CIP came to present, and Mike spoke of a rainy day fund, and we started to explore what that meant in a general meeting, and we ran out of time, and agreed to put it, or just suggested we put it on PNP. So that's the specific of this agenda item. More context for that, I think, in Julia's discussion of the rainy day fund was sit within the context of judging our overall effectiveness, and recurring conversations about that in terms of like how do we measure our PAC effectiveness, project over project, year over year. What are we doing that doesn't work, and what indeed, what do we ask? Like, what are we asking for consistently that is constantly, if not refused, is at least the first to go in a high pressure project, say at 31st and Hennepin or something like that. And Julia had more to say about that.
Which part?
Yeah, the rainy day fund in particular. Yeah, and then the.
Okay, so the idea behind that piece was, at least as I understood it, we were suggesting that that more than a rainy day fund, it was that the city really start understanding that crises like the pandemic, like the uprising, are increasing, and they're increasing. Maybe we don't know what the next kind of thing that we'll face will be, the next major impact of climate breakdown of, say, in history of a city built on white supremacy, like how that impacts how we get around will be. And while the city staff seems to really rise to the occasion around the pandemic and dealing with actuated buttons and trying to provide more space for people to be outside and keep distance, the response to George Floyd Square has shown not the same flexible creative thinking, and there's certainly been funding issues with both of those. And so as I understood it, or at least my intention in whatever role I had in it, was that we would be requesting that the city be funding and thinking about the way that our world is destabilizing, what things we don't expect we might expect. How do we plan for kind of the unplannable, except for we do have a fairly decent idea of some of what's coming towards us, storm severity, population movements, et cetera. So but what we heard from the city was that didn't come through. It came through more as a rainy day fund. And it raises the question of when we are communicating with Public Works, what are they hearing us communicate? Are we able to get those ideas across? When we're not getting projects into the CIP, maybe it's not even the project that we thought we were proposing. How do we assess this, since we often don't get direct feedback? How's that, Peter?
It's like the meeting was yesterday. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Having added this, I'm not sure what to do next with it. We've had discussions offline about measuring effectiveness that involve more than just Julia and me. So I'm interested in people's ideas here on assessment, like their own beliefs of PAC effectiveness as a committee, not necessarily personally, but as a committee, as we've been able to affect projects and I&E, and also pedestrian policies, street policies of the city. And we have time to talk about that a little bit if anybody's got anything to add.
Christopher has his hand up.
Yes, I understand what's being discussed here, but I just want to toss out something that's been kind of on my mind, and what came to sort of fruition on Thursday is that, we can look to see what effect we have on it, but I really think that we could magnify some effectiveness by getting involved earlier, because it seems to me that often we hear that it's out of scope, that kind of thing. And the scope is all determined by the money. And the money and the projects are determined by staff before PAC even gets an idea that something's percolating oftentimes. And I don't know what to do about that. We hear, stuff comes to us at 0%, but, oftentimes the money's already budgeted. And so it's really not 0%. I would say it's 90%, because the scope is absolutely determined by the money, and how much you're gonna get and how much you're gonna pitch for and all that kind of thing. That I'm just increasingly thinking that 0 and 30% are really 90 and 95%. And that's only vaguely related to this, but it all goes back to effectiveness up front, and then checking to see if we have any effect afterwards, which is, I think, more the focus of this conversation. So I will get back on point.
I think it's
totally go ahead, Julia. Yeah.
And to me, that's very well within the realm of what we've discussed. And that's come up before, like when the federal funding locks in a certain number of car lanes or a certain volume of traffic, we're fighting over scraps. There's what you're saying, that there's ways that we can be part of the discussion earlier in reimagining this in actual transformational states. Matthew, do you have, or Chris, any insight on that, or how we could make that happen?
I think it is a really good question that Christopher is raising. What I would say is, I heard Christopher say something like the scope is determined by the money, and I don't know that that's necessarily true, but I don't know if I have a proper answer. I think maybe the better way to say it is, we should try to. A good question is, when is the scope and budget set for capital projects? I think that's a good question. And then what assumptions go into those things? Because I think it's the assumptions that fill out a scope and then the cost. So I think I don't have the answer to that. I don't, but it is a good question. Maybe I'll just leave it there. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess my mind goes to like breaking it out by funding source, because I do think that they are each distinct, and that gets to a lot of what you're saying, Christopher. And I also agree with Matthew. I think it's a good question to bring up. So like for federal projects, for example, like there's the regional solicitation, which we put in applications for like 3 or 5 years out, or I don't know, do you know, Matthew? It's something like that. And so like in that case, that's probably where you're most accurate, Christopher, in that like the scope and budget are still somewhat loose, but like most generally set years in advance. And there's leeway within what you can do, and like we can increase the city match and like change that dollar amount potentially, but we don't always do that. So that's one piece, is like that's how that aspect is handled. And then there's also like reconstruction projects, which is the CIP, which we do engage directly on what those projects are going to be, and like I think I would argue that those aren't at like 90 or 95% because we really have a clean slate. Like we set the scope in terms of like what street to what street are we going to touch, but everything gets ripped up, and theoretically we could do anything with it on those. And so there is the opportunity within engagement to handle that stuff. And then there's programs, which is also in the CIP, but when those projects are chosen is not in the CIP. So that's also kind of like a different piece of things of like, how do we use $1 million in a given year? And like, when is that choice? So those are the kind of different levels of funding, I guess, sources. They kind of each have a little bit of a unique characteristic in regards to kind of what you were saying.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is more nuanced than I was stating, and I appreciate the you breaking it out that way.
But
I
just
also want to
taking
just
Hennepin
like,
Avenue,
Julia, real quick. I also just want to clarify. I appreciate what you're saying, Christopher, about like it's really at 90% when it's at 0, but just for clarity, I just want to make sure, like, when we say 0%, that's like construction design, you know, so 0%, 30% of construction design. So I totally appreciate the point you're making of a lot's determined by that 0%, but it is truly at 0% concept design. Just to avoid any confusion.
with things locked in, like Hennepin Avenue, even with us trying to see it pre-federal funding before it went to the regional solicitation, we were unable to get conversations going around that. And we were aware of it. I mean, it's been on my radar for probably 6 years, almost the entirety of my time on the PAC. So I think it's a blank slate, but it's a blank slate that maybe, I mean, it doesn't seem like something that we're able to figure out how to influence so that it's actually functionally that. It seems like the car lanes are already painted on.
So again, I appreciate the points that are being made. I just like, what I want to avoid is like, if project managers come and say we're at 0% and people start saying, well, no, you're really at like 90%, like that could just might be confusing. So I'm gonna leave that there. Sorry.
I think related to that, and this, since we don't see a lot of the details that really matter on a pedestrian level, like the exact placement of different things, and there's been a fair number of times that we've been told, well, that gets taken care of later on in the process. So if maybe expanding conceptually from what Christopher was saying, the points of the process that we see are not necessarily the points that it makes where our feedback might be the most helpful, which might be the macro and then the micro scale. Like a lot of what we are saying could be, we could have a robot that would say the same thing, narrow those lanes, remove some lanes, like we're saying the same things over and over and over again and not sure if it's having impact. And the stuff where we really could make an impact is at a point where we don't have a voice.
If there's a way to move if there's a way to move an action item, a task to assess our effectiveness, allowing for that there are different types of projects that are scoped, that have some scope restrictions thanks to federal guidelines, but also I think on the other end of things is what projects in Minneapolis, even that are defined as full reconstruction or even not, where we're not working with messing with curbs or anything, there's still items that we can identify that we consistently suggest that consistently, if not universally, are left off at the end, and why that is, that if we should bother asking for them anymore, or that might be more of an impression or a feeling than anything else. But I would like to measure that, and if there's a way of getting to a just identifying specific projects that are primed or ideal for that kind of assessing, I think that would give us a more than a feeling of how we're doing. Say identifying, I guess maybe take full reconstructions of 100% city streets, that are not that are minimally touched by county or state, and look at those.
Are you saying like
That wouldn't be
at the engineering, like focus on those at the engineering subcommittees, or are you saying some like a higher level look at that kind of project?
Higher level, like some sort of maybe call it a research project or something that would be done external to the, outside of, presented at the meetings, but researched and assessed outside of.
That sounds pretty great. I feel like there was Abigail and Alyssa's presentation was maybe kind of getting towards that, looking at specific projects and sort of breaking down the distance from where we say we want to be and where we are. But what I'm hearing you say, Peter, is maybe that we would go out after, take a resolution that we passed around a specific street, go out afterwards, really assess whether or not what we're seeing looks like what our resolutions were, especially for a project where we might have seen it and have, the minutes, the 1 or 2 resolutions, and be able to piece together what's happening, what isn't, what our role is. Is that what you're talking about?
That's not a bad start, or a bad way to look at it. And that's thank you for the specifics. Say take a project we have general consensus that didn't go so great, or feel like they didn't go so great. Hennepin Avenue downtown, for instance, or something like that. And then maybe, and then it's also at the same time take projects where we really feel happier with the result, and maybe present on that.
Christopher,
that isn't something I'd assign out. I would like to tackle. So, yeah.
My thoughts were just that it probably wouldn't be the best use of time if we agreed with the project because everyone was in agreement. But if we could go back 2 or 3 years and find a more contentious motion that reflected some disagreement with whatever plan was proposed, and then go out, 2 years later and see what the built form was, and to see how it's working, and to see if any of the concerns that were codified in a motion did come to fruition and did change things. I think a couple of those could be very illustrative. But just, and I was just trying to think of like logistically, how do you do that? And I think you start with sort of a contentious motion, from 2 or 3 years ago. That's my 2 cents.
Can I just ask, like, what do you all see as like, who's the audience of that? Is the audience the PAC to better learn about the PAC's role, or?
I would say yes. I think it's an audit of our efforts, and we can have a small sample just by nature that we can't review every project, but I just think it's an audit for our own use.
And what
Mhm.
what do you envision, like, using that towards?
Well, I think it's a couple fold. One, to see if when we, and again, the sample is going to skew it one or the other, but to see if our voices are effective. If there is something that was presented that we just disagree with, as reflected in a motion, to see if we were able to have any change occur. I think that's just to check in on ourselves, and if and then from that, decide if what could have been done differently if none of the things were acknowledged or changed. What could we do differently? Or if they were, what do we think was persuasive? I mean, really what we're talking about is just auditing how effective we are, I think. And I don't necessarily think it's for Public Works to say, well, you know, we raised these concerns 3 years ago, but you didn't incorporate any of them. Okay, they've got the reasons for that, but I think it's more for our use rather than Public Works use.
I would agree. I would add one other thing that might come up is finding out if there's things that did make it into the final plan, but didn't necessarily get built as designed. For example, I've seen sidewalk width narrowed, and it would be interesting to know if when the like south of 31st on Hennepin, the city didn't want to deal with the right of way, the legal stuff, and that was something we never got a report back on. I don't know if the space was taken evenly from, all different modes on that corridor, or if it was just from the sidewalks. Like, it would be interesting too to know when things don't go according to plan, what are the presumptions and choices being made there?
And I just want to clarify really quickly on that. Like, when you say plans, that means a different thing again in the engineering world than it does like when you see like a 30% design concept and stuff. So it may match the 100% plans. There are cases where things get built wrong. So like that is one thing, but like likely what you're talking about, presumably a lot of the time is going to be things that at 100% design on the engineering side, they drew it up as that and changed things between 30 to 100% to deal with whatever came up, if it's right away or a sewer is there and they can't do something, or like engineering type problem. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, but every solution has choices implicit in it. So it's when we see things and we're like, oh great, we're going to have 6-foot wide sidewalks near this dense walkable area, and then we go out and it's like 4. Like, to get a sense of, oh well, we just took a foot from every mode. We took what is going on, how do we get there? And knowing that isn't necessarily something that we see, but there must be guidance, or maybe there's not, maybe there could be, for how to deal with unexpected problems without penalizing, like while following complete streets in those solutions.
And I think it would be a nice opportunity. We could combine our a walk with a field trip to go out and look at a project that was presented 2 years ago.
That, just so you know, that's kind of what I was saying earlier about if you have a quorum, we got to be careful about that. Like, we can maybe
we will have a limited number of spaces.
You could either you could totally do that. If you want to set it up and have 7 people, then you can talk about whatever you want and look at a project and stuff. But if it's beyond that, we could still walk anywhere we want in the city, but we just got to be careful about what type of things we're talking about out there. The BAC just also brought this up as they're planning like their group bike ride. So there's definitely ways to get around it, but.
And this needn't be the first, and this first step need be, I want it to be part of a overall, my feeling is we have no real, this would be a way to have begin a conversation and have a continuing thought about how we measure our effectiveness. This may not be the way to do it, but it's a way to get us thinking about, from meeting to meeting, thinking about just in general how effective we are. One project isn't going to make or break our morale. I hope if we go out to if we're reviewing something we're not real keen on the result of, but it may spur us to other ideas of more discussion about how we measure effectiveness rather than going, well, while we go month to month, there's so many things that just go right past us, and month after month after month, I'd like to. I feel like it could be if there's a way to measure effectiveness strategically, we'd be better for it.
I'm wrestling with this idea of looking at your resolution and then going out on site and looking at the ground, like, and maybe that's the way to do it, but I'm almost wondering if it might be easier for you all to wrestle with like the resolution and the layout that's approved by council, because that to me is a more clear measure of like that's when city council is making a decision on what that street should look like when it's built. And yeah, like Chris said, sometimes there's changes for whatever reason, usually technical or something like that. But does that make sense? I don't know. I'm just picturing like, are you gonna be out there with tape measures, or you know what I mean? Because like usually it's like your resolution happens and then a number of weeks or months go by and city council makes a decision that can tell you if your resolution was met or not. I don't know.
I think there's two pieces, and one would absolutely be served by that. The other might require us going out on the ground. Because I think it's also important for us to, like, one of the reasons that I go out to different places is that it's not just theoretical, but to say, how does this space feel? Like the one that we just saw, where they're talking about 150 trucks a day. Well, does it feel, what is the makeup of the space, as well as the width. I don't have a long enough to measure.
Sure. And that makes sense too. Like, and that's why I'm curious, like what the primary goals are. Going to Hennepin Avenue south of Lake, you'll know if you feel comfortable, or if like a raised protected bike lane would have felt better, or something like that. I don't know.
Sidewalks wide enough to pass people would have been nice, but that's outside stuff like that.
So I'm going to add on to Matthew's idea, because I know it's tough for staff to keep track of all this stuff, but every resolution we pass on a project, a capital project, and if we had a comment that the city proposed 11-foot lanes and we wanted 10-foot lanes, it'd be nice to hear back what the city council approved. If we could just get a short report on all those resolutions that go through the council, because we lose the track of them after have gone past us.
That sounds awesome.
And that might be just a start. And then maybe we could take one of those projects and go dig into it a little deeper. But again, it's up to the staff then to get back to us with all that additional information.
Yeah, that seems like it could be great if we could figure out how we could be just getting that regularly and sharing it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be a good idea.
I will say I think it is a good idea, and we'll absolutely not be able to commit to that as staff right now.
Okay.
We can maybe talk a little bit more.
Is that something? I mean, that seems, I've only ever looked at Extension Avenue downtown past as plan, for sure. So maybe it's something, it's out there, it's public information, and maybe we could try to figure out a way of taking that on ourselves. And I'm not sure
Yeah,
how difficult or time consuming it is.
I agree. I think maybe like starting with one or two examples and looking at it and seeing what that is. And what I mean is, I as staff, I don't think we can commit to having like just a regular, Excel spreadsheet that we just constantly track and update. But if people want to look at a couple things, that'd be very simple, I guess, for Chris and I to do. Because basically, it's finding the resolution, and that's easy. We have folders for that, and then using the LIMS, Legislative Information Management System, to search for that particular action, and
Is that
Yeah,
necessarily only in staff hands to do? Is that something is that public information in LIMS
yes,
and we could just easily do?
Well, moving forward, it is, but the historical ones are not because we didn't transfer them over. So if you all came up with a list, like Matthew was saying, like a specific list of like a number of resolutions from the last few years, like we can pull those because we have those offline. Moving forward, you all can do any of this tracking by looking at the resolutions on LIMS every time, like that. That's all public.
For anything that's 2021 or 2020, is that true, Chris? Or
I've
The
got
current
all-
resolutions are up.
okay,
2021, I believe, Millicent, is the only year that's up
okay.
currently.
Yeah,
Is that right?
2021 is up, and I think a few of the 2021s are, and I'm throwing a few of them up there as I have the time, but anything before that, we have those
Okay.
archived.
I probably have everything in my files. If that's of interest to anybody, I've got all the resolutions, I know that much.
That's
So if you
awesome.
need them, I can send them to you.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not either.
That's what the secretary does, hoard information. But yeah, Melissa will put them up on LIMS.
Okay, then it sounds like we have a step then, and I'm going to assign myself to present to the rest of the packet subcommittee of some suggested resolutions to start from. Let's say 3 from the last one a year from the last 3 years. How's that sound?
Great.
Good.
Sounds good.
I'm digging that sun in your frame there, Neil.
Nice. Oh yeah.
It's like a painting or something.
Isn't that fun?
Okay.
Oh, it's right in the back window, isn't it? That's right. With the tree. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks all for the discussion on that and really helping me with the thoughts that I started with. And if we're through with we've finished with that item, we have the next item is subcommittee quorum rules. A discussion on that from Chris. Oh, Chris.
I think Matthew, did you want to
Yeah.
take it, Matthew?
I'll give it a start and then look for help from Chris and Milson and providing the rest of the context. And then this is basically a heads up / discussion item. We've gotten some extra. Oh, I think I did. Did I bring it up with this group already? Someone tell me if I didn't. I can't. I'm kind of getting lost between the BSC and this one. But we had a conversation with the clerk's office, and the long story short, they would like us to actually identify a roster, like a membership roster for each subcommittee that is a subset of the full committee. So I'm going to pause there for a second and clarify. Right now, both of the subcommittees and the full committee all have the full membership, the 15-member appointed membership with a quorum of 8. And we follow that quorum for the full committee, and we've always historically just said, like, you know, show up to one or the other of the subcommittees. You don't have to tell anybody, you don't have to commit to anything, just you know, do that, and whoever shows up, that's the meeting. In their mind, in the clerk's office, you know, I think frustratingly for many, they've been as the remote meetings have been I guess started up and becoming more normative. Anyway, they want all the committees to run the same, and so in their mind, subcommittees should have a subset of members, kind of like TMPW has 6. So the Transportation Public Works Committee of City Council has 6 members that are a subset of the 13 city council members, and then they have their own quorum. They would like us to do that. They're asking us to do that. So I'm not sure exactly what the timeline is or when we'll do that, but I just wanted to throw that out there. There are some complications, like what is the right number? Well, first of all, I want to find out what you all think about that. But some of the complications are, it does make it more formal. So if we identify 8 of the 15 PAC members to a committee, like specifically 8, 5 of those 8 have to show up to the meeting, or you can't have the meeting at all. And so maybe that's okay, maybe not, but you know, do we pick 8? Do we pick 4? So I'm going to pause there. Does that make sense, Chris? Milson, do you have anything to add?
Well, I'll just say one other thing that we've spoken. Oh, some background noise. Sorry. One other thing that we've spoken about is just like how we communicate this, and inevitably we'll just need to have more communication. So that we will be running a higher risk of having to cancel subcommittee meetings. Like, that's just a fact. We've never had to do that based on membership before. And so by doing this, we put ourselves in a position where if we don't have quorum, we can't have the meeting, period. And we have to send everybody home, including the presenters as well as members. And so since we will have to do this, the folks who do sign up, most likely we would want to have some sort of like confirmation process for each meeting, like email a day before, yes, I'll be able to be there, no, I won't. And if we have a problem with quorum, maybe we cancel in advance, just to kind of help be able to communicate more clearly. So there's probably loads of other logistical things to figure out, but that was just one aspect. Millicent, I don't know if you have anything else.
I agree with you, Chris. It causes a problem with the same people showing up to every subcommittee. It's something that you guys hadn't really dealt with before.
You know, and there's also an aspect of maybe it's just fine because we do have a core group that we know tends to be at each one. So maybe it won't be a problem 10 out of 12 times or something like that. But if it is a problem 2 out of 12, like, that kind of sucks. You know, that's like, so I don't know.
So
Is it digital?
did they say that 4 was the minimum quorum? 4 people?
I did press on that a little bit, and I believe that's the thought, is we could get away with 4. You know, there's pros and cons to that too, right? Because then there's like pressure on 3 of those 4, which maybe is fine, but yeah, 4 could be the minimum.
Is it
4 is the minimum number of people on the list, so quorum would be 2.
3.
3.
3.
One
sorry.
more than half, yeah.
So
Above half. Okay.
so yeah, we'd probably want it to be an odd number. Like, so like 5 would also,
Yeah.
quorum would be 3. So we would do either 5 or 7.
And more alternates to make that number. Okay, that's cool. That's a good idea. So maybe we do just pick 5.
Well, I think, I mean, there are 5 people that come to I&E pretty regularly. I mean, at least 5, sometimes more, and 5 people that come to P&P regularly. I mean,
So
that's,
is that, do you think the group would be comfortable just at the next full committee, just having this on the agenda, picking the 5 and seeing how it goes?
or having,
Well,
go ahead.
is this assuming, is this 4 meetings that are going to continue to be digital?
I think
'Cause
we
that's a
should
really different
assume
app.
digital.
Okay, and how
I think
often
it's-
can we reset any of this? What
That
is
is
the
also
mechanism
a
by
good
which we
question.
say? Okay, because I mean, I don't really. It seems more to make more sense that we go historically and have in line what we're thinking, so that I don't want people to feel pressured because they feel guilty for not showing up, and now they're going to commit to something that they haven't done in the past when this is how it functions. Like anybody can still show up, correct?
Yeah.
Can
Okay.
I ask a question?
And Christopher, yeah, Christopher's had your hand up. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's right. Now, I seem to recollect that we have voted in subcommittees on occasion. If that is the case and a vote is needed, are only the listed members eligible to vote? So if 4 other PAC members attend, as we are encouraging everybody, particularly new members, to attend, do they just sit there and twiddle their thumbs, or are they eligible to vote?
I don't think
I
our
mean-
votes have been binding in the
Well-
Yeah, I would
subcommittees. I
rather
think it's
just
just
have a
for
norm that we
the
don't
project managers.
vote on subcommittees.
Okay.
And Christopher, you're right that we did in the past, but we did that systematically in the past. We would always vote just as a thing at subcommittees, but the reality is like we didn't ever need to do that. And so part of it was a time saving measure, but part of it was also kind of cutting out something that we didn't need to do when we moved online. So it's been kind of a systematic switch to not needing that, because anyone can present any resolution at a full meeting, regardless of if 6 other members voted on it or not. So it's kind of a useless piece, I guess.
Well, I think that's an advantage, just because I wouldn't want, and I think it should be 5 people, by the way, for the reason that I articulated, Chris. It's better than 4 because we could have 2 no-shows. So it should be 5, but I would feel bad if, something was interesting and 8 people came, and if there was ever to be a vote, I don't want people to be excluded. So I think it is a good policy not to vote on the subcommittees if this change is going to go into effect, and it sounds it will. So I think just 5 people. And I think, just throw it open at the next PAC meeting, get some names down there, because at the end of the day, it's the same sort of mix of 8 people or something that always show up.
Yeah, I will just throw out, so for the BAC, we were talking about this also, or just internally, we were talking about this, and it gets to be like sort of a math problem that's probably out of my league, but the suggestion came up of like, let's look at the last 6 months or like year. We have it in the notes of like who's shown up to these, and see what that number is, because there's a chance that, so like if you bump it up to 7, then you only need 4, which is 1 more than 3, but like 3 people can miss on any given month, whereas with 5, only 2 people can miss on any given month. So like that, like it gives you like a different benefit that may be harmful depending on our patterns, or it may be beneficial. So I do think we should just look back at our attendance and see, because there's a chance that 7 is a more optimal number too.
But that would be more if we have more regular attendees, but more absences from each of the regular attendees. And I feel like we have a really stable every single meeting.
You might be completely right. I'm putting it out there that I think we should look at the past.
I have to say that the whole thing is cockamamie as hell. The obvious difference between a meeting of an advisory committee, which is a citizen non-paid understroke. On the one hand.
Not even a bus pass.
And the legislature of the city, which is paid a substantial salary to go to the damn meetings, and the only excuse not to is, of course, they've got to meet a constituent somewhere and iron out some problem. They're paid to be at the damn meetings. This isn't some vacation thing they can just fluff off. They ought to damn well be at the meetings. And of course, that's their job. I've got another job, being at Lund's. I take time off for these meetings, and they're garbage online, but I'm willing to do them anyway. But the fact is, it's typical of the clerk mind. Everything's got to be exactly the same for your convenience. No, it doesn't have to be for your convenience. It has to be for my convenience, because I'm willing to join city government 2 hours a month to do this stuff. It's for my convenience, sorry to say. The mayor's and the city council is paid. All 14 of you are paid. I think this is totally ridiculous.
As is the clerk.
And I would love to tell the clerk to his face what I think of it, because I've met him and he's a goofball. But I can understand why it's easy for them to make these stupid changes, but it's jackass. It's stupid, and because it also means that with Zoom meetings, we have no way of letting any of the public into our meetings, ever, because there's no place to go. We've never seen Luis again. And he was one of the most productive people in the pack.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I mean, he put more better ideas out than he quantitatively put more good ideas out than I ever have.
I do think there's an element, and then I think Abigail, I can't tell if you raised for this purpose or not. Go ahead.
My raised hand is one. When do we have to make this decision on who's on? Can you give me a date?
As soon as we can.
Right,
but,
we have to do it. No
okay,
question.
so are we making a decision today or no? Because we only have 10 minutes left.
No, let's bring this to the full committee and see if we can make a decision then. If not, we can slow play it another month.
They don't have a deadline for us.
No. It's
Okay,
soon as possible.
Let's drag our feet.
I would just suggest that maybe we email in to either Matthew or Chris or Millicent, and we say, I don't mind being a member on this subcommittee because I will try to attend. And then you can take that email list and share it at the full committee, and then we can decide on it as a committee because people have indicated interest. Does that work?
Yeah, second by me.
Oh, okay, so maybe this, Millicent, can you email out? Because there's members that aren't on. Well, yes, Abigail, we can do that. Let's figure out the best way to do that.
Okay, so maybe an explanation email with a respond to this if you'd like to be on the list for the committee. We will decide it actually, like we can even say we'll vote on it or whatever we want to do at the June full meeting or at the July full meeting or whenever our timeline needs to be.
Okay.
Because then
And it needn't be super obligatory in the email because we can hash that all at the full meeting. Just ask people who'd be interested and then narrow it down.
And just one last quick piece is quorum has to be established to start the meeting. So also we should just make that a part of like whatever email and communications that we send out, because if we don't have quorum until 4:40, then we lose 10 minutes. And so like part of agreeing to be there is agreeing to be on time also.
Could we have the city clerk come in per Neil's point?
No, because he won't do it, and there's no point. They obviously want this a lot.
So the BAC also asked that, and I committed to asking the clerk to come talk to them, and I'll do the same for the PAC. So I was gonna say, like, there is an element of like, how would we do it? Who's interested? What's the number of that? But there's also the element of Neil's feedback, which makes sense, right? Like, but
I do have to log off no later than 5.
Yeah, I'm gonna arrest this discussion because we do have a final item to get to. Everyone's okay with that. I will hand it off to Abigail for the complete streets policy update. And thanks, Abigail.
Sure. So the Complete Streets working group, which is Jim Welsh from the PAC and Alyssa from the BAC, have been working tirelessly because they're going through and editing the Complete Streets policy. All of this was attached in the agenda. And as you can see, I think Alyssa and Jim also we worked to have a letter written to the Complete Streets policy team of Public Works to just say we disagree with all of these changes and we think it's problematic because it's extremely problematic. Basically what they're saying is that priorities will stay the same except for where things are needed, basically prioritizing everything, so prioritizing nothing. So the policy kind of becomes really watered down. And the biggest issue is, I think the goal was, and I'm just verifying with Alyssa, that we need to pass a resolution basically saying that we don't want any of these changes. And I think our goal was to pass one in June. Matthew, is that the correct timeline?
I would like to add a little context and then answer that question. So there was a lot of robust discussion at the Complete Streets workshop in line with what Abigail just said. I just want to say in my observation, Katie and other staff heard that feedback and are going to, I have some notes here, but are planning on changing the timeline a little bit and taking some time to absorb the feedback that was given because it was fairly robust. And that to have another work group meeting that they weren't planning to, which I think is really good news, and then come back to the Pack and Back subcommittee with an update on the update. So in a sense, I think it was a fantastic example of advising and advocacy. And I'll say, I think Katie White did a great job of hearing that and listening. And again, we'll see what the final product looks like. But from a process perspective, they totally listened. She totally got that vibe. And so I think that's important. And let me see if there's anything else in my notes. So yeah, so I don't think it's urgent to pass a resolution at this time. But I'm glad that you have what other people saw, meaning the red line version. And I think we should talk about it when we have more time, maybe at the full committee, just what some of the changes that Abigail brought up were and why they may be bad from your perspective or not ideal, whatever word you want. So that's my summary. Is I think it's pretty good from that perspective.
Okay, so then I guess we can hold on a resolution until they present to us. Are they going to present to us a draft so that we have time to pass a resolution before they bring it in front of council? You're saying that they'll have a work group committee, then they'll re-present to our subcommittee.
That is the message that I would carry, is that that's always what we hope for. Sometimes yes, I'll just say that's the intent.
So then we want to pass a resolution today, and we will definitely pass on when we see the changes to the changes, which I really like. So thank you, Matthew.
Cool.
Does anyone have any questions on that probably Matthew would be able to answer and not me?
Alrighty. I see no hands. Thank you, Abigail.
Yeah, so I guess we can finish. It's up to you, I guess.
Yeah, sure. If any announcements, I want to thank Matthew Deardahl for being on top of the raised hands, so they're a little invisible to me today. So thank you for that.
Oh, no
problem. I'm hearing no announcements. I will say we're adjourned then. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thanks,
Bye
everybody.
now.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Enjoy the summer night.